It's a disorder of self-regulation. And it's a quantitative deficit. So that begs the question, how far behind is this child? And so the rule that I have taught for years in our clinics to families, and it remains a very good rule of thumb, is the average ADHD child is 30% behind their age. Some are even more. But on average, across all ADHD children, it looks to be about 30%. So here's what I want parents to do. If your child is 10, he has the self-control of a 7-year-old. That is how long he can persist. That is how long he can remember. That is how long he can go without supervision. His ability to self-organize is that of a 7-year-old. Now, what would you do for a 7-year-old? How would we arrange homework? What else would we be doing around chores, around social functioning, around independence from parents? You wouldn't be doing as much as you would with a 10-year-old. You would not allow as much responsibility, as much freedom, as much independence. So I want parents to be lowering their expectations to the child's executive age. What is his self-regulatory age? It's 30% younger. All right, that's what you can expect. And if you are expecting more than that, you're my problem, because you're causing the conflict. You are like a parent of a dyslexic child demanding normal reading. You are like the parent of a mildly retarded child demanding normal self-sufficiency, normal cognitive development. You're my problem, because you just don't get it. So I want you to get it. It's a 30% lag. That's where they're at. That's what you can expect. If you're asking for more, you're going to have to do something to rearrange that environment to allow them to show what they know. But if you don't do anything, they're going to be about 30% behind. So what does that mean at 16 about giving kids a license? Are you out of your mind? Right? You just gave an 11-year-old a motor vehicle. And you're shocked to see the driving consequences, right? You may have an 18-year-old who's one of the few that's going to go on to college. He's 12. That's his executive age. So you need to understand the 30% rule, because it applies to everything. I have a 14-year-old daughter with ADHD. Should she be allowed to babysit? Are you crazy? Right? This is a 9-year-old being given care of an infant? No way. I don't care if she finished the Red Cross babysitting course. I don't care if she's got a certificate. We don't let 9-year-olds attend 3-month-old babies unsupervised. And that is her executive age. You think this is hypothetical? We have legal cases of people even into their late teens and 20s who have killed babies out of anger, out of impatience, out of immaturity, out of not knowing what to do when the baby got upset, and then their emotion comes to the forefront. So we don't want to go there. So you should be looking at all of these avenues of independence and applying the 30% rule to them. And that's what you allow. And if you are going to give them more, you better be doing something to see that they can handle it. Hyperactivity is no longer the name of this disorder, because it declines steeply, and by adolescence it's nearly gone, and by adulthood it's an internal state. It's a feeling inwardly of a need to be busy and doing multiple things. And it's a busyness of one's mind, one's ideas. There is a restless quality to their cognition, but not to their outward behavior. In fact, our research has shown that hyperactivity is of no diagnostic value in adulthood. In fact, being restless is more associated with anxiety disorders by the time you're 30 than it is being associated with ADHD. We just don't pay attention to it. It's of no relevance to diagnosis. So let's understand that the real problem here is not restlessness. It is, in fact, inhibition. There is a failure to develop appropriate inhibition, and it affects your behavior, it affects your words, it affects your mind and your thoughts, and we need to return to the idea which we have gotten rid of, that it affects your emotions. By emotional impulsiveness, I mean this quickness to anger, to be easily excitable, to have low frustration tolerance, to be easily angered by things around you, and to display your emotions much more quickly than other people do. Now, this is not a mood disorder, even though it starts to look like one. Mood disorders are where you are generating too much emotion. What ADHD is a failure to regulate normal emotion. It is a self-regulation disorder. The feeling you're having is normal. That you are not moderating it is not. It is this inability to self-soothe, to self-calm, and to then moderate the emotion to be more acceptable for the context and for what you hope to accomplish here, the goal that is at hand. Your long-term welfare is at stake. Can you modify that emotion to be more socially acceptable, to be less costly, less damaging? The first attention problem is persistence toward a goal. Notice that this implies behavior, motivation, and the future. That is very important. The other forms of attention do not. ADHD is not a problem of perception, of filtering, of processing, of how the posterior part of our brain functions. It is a problem with the motor part of the brain, this frontal lobe. Can you sustain action toward a goal adequately to attain it? That implies a motivation deficit, and that is true. And it implies future-directed behavior, and that is true. ADHD is a failure to direct behavior forward in time. We cannot persist toward these delayed endpoints in life, the tasks, the goals, the things that need to get done. So persistence is deficit one in the area of attention. Now, to persist toward a goal, you must be able to resist distractions. But that too is not a perceptual issue. It is a motor issue. The person with ADHD does not have problems with perceiving distractors better than others. It is that they respond to distractors more than others. And that is an inhibitory failure, not a perceptual difference. You and I may all hear the noise in the kitchen. The person with ADHD is compelled to react to it. Oh, did you hear that? I guess they're washing dishes. Maybe I'll stop in and take a look. Did you know I was a dishwasher when I was back in college? That's how I earned my way. Do you see what's going on here? You all heard the dish, but it was irrelevant to what we're here to do today. But to the ADHD individual, the distraction is going to provoke a response, and the response can't be inhibited. And now they're off to the races, skipping from one thing to another to another. Now, there is a third aspect here that is impaired, but it is not one of attention. Most people, when they are distracted, re-engage the incompleted goal. The person with ADHD is far less likely to do so. And this has nothing to do with attention. This is working memory. So I would want a family to understand that there's more here than inattentiveness. There is a working memory disorder. Self-regulation is not just for short-term self-improvement. It's for long-term self-improvement. It's to see to your own welfare over the long term. Should you act this way, given the sustained or delayed consequences that lie ahead for you? That is what you must stop and think about, and that is what they don't stop and think about, the delayed consequences. So your child is not just inattentive. They cannot stop and engage in a series of self-directed actions that they will now use to modify and moderate their behavior so as to bring it in line with their long-term welfare, the future. And that's what your child is struggling so mightily with in their development. It's what the other kids are acquiring, and your child is so far behind in. These are the things your child struggles to do. Number one, can you stop? Can you wait? Because as Rabelais said, everything comes to those who can wait. The waiting is the tough part. You must build in a pause between the event and what you plan to do about it. And in ADHD, there is no pause. The event happens, and your response is up, out, done. You will engage in 4 subsequent actions. The first is mental imagery. You will recall the past, and you will play a DVD of it in your head. You have a theater in your mind. It is your visual imagery system, the mind's eye. So your child not only cannot stop, they cannot visualize as well as other children. And what they do not visualize before they act is the past, the relevant past. Do you have experiences in this situation previously? If so, what would they have told you to do? Lay people call this hindsight, and the word sight is no coincidence. You are visually imagining your history. What does it have to say? And you lack hindsight. Now, this will lead to foresight. You look back to anticipate. What does ADHD lead to? No foresight. You are not thinking ahead because you weren't looking back either. Hindsight and foresight are the opposite sides of the same coin. Visual imagery. So you will not use your images of your past to tell you what to do. You will just do. And then by 5 years of age, you will get the third executive deficit. You can't talk to yourself. Young children by 5 years of age are beginning to internalize their speech and use it on themselves. Just watch any first and second grade classroom and you will see this. If you have a 3 to 5-year-old, you'll hear it. They're talking to themselves out loud most of the day, whether anyone is in the room or not. Listen to bedtime and you will hear what I mean. But over the next 10 years, this external voice gets directed to themselves and slowly made private and mental in its form. And so originates the voice in your head. And that voice in your head is there for one very important reason. It's to help control yourself. You start telling yourself what to do, and it starts to work. And now, any family I would explain this to would understand that not only can your child not stop, not only do they not have the mind's eye, they don't have the mind's voice. And what is there is very weak. It's not controlling them. So now you know why they can't do what you tell them to do. They can't follow instructions, they can't follow rules, they can't internalize the rules of the situation, because everything I have just said requires a voice in your head, and they don't have that. The next comes from the first three, and that is the mind's heart, the ability to manage your emotions so that they are more socially acceptable, so that they are consistent with your goals, not conflicting with your welfare. And so we will see the ADHD child, as we've already described them, easily frustrated, quick to anger, impatient, and just overall more excitable and more emotional than others. But what gets lost in this explanation is something more fundamental. Our emotions are our motivations. If you cannot manage your emotions, you cannot manage your motivation either. Because the fourth executive ability is the source of self-motivation. Self-motivation is the fuel tank for all future directed behavior. There is no getting ready for tomorrow if there is no self-motivation. So what has the ADHD child lost here? They cannot motivate themselves. What does that mean? It means that you will always be dependent on the environment around you and its immediate consequences for how hard and how long you can work. And if there are no consequences in that context, you cannot work. You cannot persist. You will not get it done. The fourth executive ability now explains to these parents why this child can play video games for hours and cannot do homework for more than a few minutes. Because the video game provides external, continuous, 100% consequences for interacting with it, and the homework does nothing. When a problem is solved on a sheet of paper, nothing happens. The consequences are delayed, and therein lies the trouble. So the corollary of this is if you want to see an ADHD person fail, you put him in any environment where there are no consequences, and I guarantee you failure. The work will not get done because the person cannot self-motivate. And this is not a choice, and this is not willful, and this is not a child who just could, if they wished, wake up tomorrow and smell the coffee and get busy and do the work. They cannot. This is an internal, neurogenetic, executive failure. You can't self-motivate like other people. So it doesn't matter what your goals are, you won't get there. Because self-motivation is required for all goal-directed action. The final executive ability, which will not emerge until late childhood in the person with ADHD, is the mind's playground. This is the ability to plan and problem solve. How many different possible options can you generate right now to get around this problem? This ability to simulate multiple possible future options is the highest executive function in humans. It is the source of all cultural innovation, but it originates in problem solving. How quickly in your mind can you think of multiple ways to overcome the problem you just encountered? And people with ADHD will struggle with this one as much as with the others. So if you want to understand ADHD as a parent, you have got to understand these are the 5 things that are delayed in this child. The ability to stop, to use visual imagery, to use your mind's voice, to use your mind's heart and emotion and motivation, and when called upon to do so, to simulate multiple possibilities when faced with a problem or when planning out what you hope to do. Planning and problem solving. Those are the 5 executive abilities. We know where they are in the frontal lobe. We know that ADHD children have lost all 5 of them. Actually, that's a bit of an overstatement. It's not that they don't have them. It's that they are quite delayed. In addition to those, there are some other areas of impairment, not the least of which is managing money. As they move away from home, as they get jobs, as they get credit, as they borrow money, as they take out car loans, we start to see them having troubles paying their bills, paying them on time, so that they get their utilities turned off, their cars repossessed, their credit rating is terrible, because you've given a very impulsive person credit. But this is an area that very few people took a look at. But duh, I mean, it makes perfect sense when you phrase it as a disorder of self-control given a credit card. And now we can understand what's going to happen with the credit problems. So obviously, they need more accountability in their financial management. Social problems are going to continue into adulthood for many, though not for all of them. They often, as adults, describe themselves as having trouble sustaining long-term relationships, particularly dating and marital relationships, or partnering with people. And we will see that they do experience divorce at a higher rate than other people do because of these difficulties. So ADHD leads you to act on impulse, not resist distraction. You are less able to think back about what you are doing, about the action that lies ahead. You cannot use your hindsight, and therefore your foresight is gone. You do not plan ahead. You live in the moment. This is going to rob you of your sense of time, because the sense of time comes from looking back to look ahead, looking across time and knowing where I'm going. You will not have a subjective sense of time, and that alone is going to be a devastating adult disability. You have the consummate disorder of time management. It's no wonder they're always late. You will not be able to talk to yourself, to reason with yourself, to ask yourself questions, and to remind yourself of the rules that are governing the immediate situation. And therefore, it doesn't matter what people say to you over and over and over again, you won't do it. No amount of nattering by your teacher or your mother will overcome the internal mind's voice deficit. You will not be able to use language as well as other people to regulate yourself. And that is going to also lead you to have a self-motivation problem and a problem with regulating your emotions and with self-soothing when you do become emotional. And then, as we've said, you will have trouble with planning and problem solving. So if you want to know the symptom list of ADHD, this is it. The DSM is but a mere superficial reflection of the most obvious symptoms of these 5 executive deficits. But to truly understand ADHD, you need to know that these 5 are all there, underneath. In a single sentence, what is the purpose of the frontal lobe to humans? It is to organize your behavior across time in anticipation of what is coming at you, the future. So ADHD creates a blindness to time, or technically, to be more accurate, a nearsightedness to the future. Okay, ADHD, right, is at its heart a blindness to time, or technically, to be exact, it is a nearsightedness to the future. Just as people who are nearsighted can only read things close at hand, people with ADHD can only deal with things near in time. The further out the event lies, the less they are capable of dealing with it. And this is why everything is left to the last minute, because they only deal with last minutes. That's all they perceive, that's all they deal with, that's all they organize to. And so their life is a series of one crisis after another, all of which were avoidable because people prepared and they didn't. They weren't ready on time, in time, over time, with what they needed at that time. Note the word time. Right? So ADHD is destroying the timing and timeliness of human behavior. That is a very important thing for parents to understand. Because while a 3-year-old does not have to have a sense of time, a 30-year-old does. And one of the most devastating deficits in adult life that ADHD produces is a disruption in the fabric of time. They can't cope with it as well as others. Now, this ability to organize across time comes with the capacity to build pyramids of behavior, from little behaviors to the bigger behaviors above them to the bigger goals above them. All human behavior can be organized into a hierarchy. Think about planning a wedding. Can you imagine the hierarchy you would have to create? The decision trees, and when they would have to be done, and when you would have to book the church and get the minister and get the flowers and book the reception hall. And all of those come with little subroutines like picking up a telephone and calling your minister, right? It's the frontal lobe that allows you to organize all of those toward the single overarching purpose, the wedding. And that's what ADHD destroys. People with ADHD cannot hierarchically organize behavior. And so they are accustomed to dealing with behaviors in little fits and starts. But they can't glue those together as well as others to create the bigger goal to the bigger goal all the way up. And that's why you see a short attention span. It's not really a short attention span. It's the inability to organize behavior across time into a hierarchy. The ability to look ahead is called intention. So ADHD is actually IDD. It's intention deficit disorder. Because it doesn't matter what your intentions are, you're not going to do them. So, now I want you to understand something. Your brain can be split into 2 pieces. The back part is where you acquire knowledge. The front part is where you use it. The back part is knowledge. The front part is performance. ADHD, like a meat cleaver, just split your brain in half. So it doesn't matter what you know. You won't use it. You have what we call in psychology a performance disorder. Performance disorders have nothing to do with skill. You have all the skills other people your age possess, but you can't use them. Because you see, it's the executive system where the rubber meets the road, where what you know gets applied in every day what you do. And ADHD is a disorder of doing what you know. It is not a disorder of knowing what to do. And that is a very important thing I want families to understand as well. Your child, unless they were raised in a zoo or in a very impoverished area or were adopted out of some far-fetched, war-torn, undeveloped country, has all the information and knowledge that the other kids their age have. What they can't do is use it. It is the application of what you know that this disorder robs you of. So you can be the smartest person on the planet, and you're still going to do some pretty stupid things. Because it's not what you know. It's doing it. Number 1, your child cannot stop and hold things in mind. So don't make them. You need to use external, physical forms of information, which means sticky notes, signs, symbols, charts, cues, reminders. The issue here is not the what, it's the why. You must find a substitute for working memory. And that means something external. The information, whatever it is that is key for you to remember right here, right now, needs to be outside of your brain, in the visual field. You have got to externalize, is the phrase for that, the information that other people are holding in mind. It's what we are doing after age 55 and women in perimenopause. We are using a lot of sticky notes, let me tell you. If you're an adult with ADHD, you should not be going anywhere without a paper journal in your pocket with a pen. Because anything you agree to do or anything others ask you to do is to be immediately written in that journal. And that journal is welded to your body. That is your working memory. Use it. And by the way, we find journals are better than digital devices because they lose the devices and they don't remember to turn them on and they don't remember to dictate into them. So as good as those things may sound and as high-tech as they are, the good old paper and pencil notebook seems to do the job, okay? And if I were you, I would even have it on a chain like a motorcycle gang member has his wallet. It is there from sunup to sundown. Man, when you put your pants on, that is in it all the time, right? And now you have a working memory. You have no internal clock. So if anything involves time, there must be a timer. There must be something physical outside of you that signals the passage of time. For young children, cooking timers are great, but there are various other devices, including watches that beep every 5 minutes and vibrators that you can buy at the addwarehouse.com that have digital timers built in, and you can set them to just vibrate in your pocket every so often. I don't care what the stimulus is. This is the why, people, not the what, right? The why is you have no sense of time. So if I give you something that involves time, I have got to give you a timer. And if this extends more than just a few minutes to a half hour, you are going to need a day planner, a Palm Pilot, or some other means of keeping track of time. A week-at-a-glance calendar is not a bad thing either. But you are going to become timer and calendar dependent, addicted, so that you can organize your life as well as other people who don't need to rely on those things so much. You cannot see the future coming at you. So if there is something you've agreed to do over time, if this child has a book report or a science project, you are going to break that into baby steps and do a piece a day. You are not going to point at the future and keep harping about summer reading. Have you done your summer reading? We've got that book report that's due next week. Have you done that? Right? No, we are going to take the book report and you are going to read 3 pages today. You are going to write 4 sentences today, and I will give you 15 tokens right now. And that's how we're going to get this done. We are going to break the future into pieces and do a piece a day. And stop pointing at the future because you can't organize to the future. That is your disability. That's like going onto an inpatient unit at the psychiatric hospital and saying, God, these people hallucinate around here. What's going on? It's an inpatient unit. They're schizophrenics. What did you think, right? You should not be shocked that you have to break things down for people who have a time management disorder. And so you should do it for people with ADHD as well. Break the future into pieces. By the way, what does ERO mean on this? It means that the future comes at you in 3 pieces. The events that are coming toward you, the responses you prepare, and the consequences, the outcomes of what you're doing. ERO. So here's the lesson I would want this family to understand. If those E's and R's and O's are kept close together, you don't need a frontal lobe. And ADHD people can do them. That's a video game. But the minute you stretch these things apart with time, like a book report, you've got to read this book, your report's due in 30 days, it'll take a week to grade all the papers. I just put a month between the E and the R, and a week between the R and the O. And if you have ADHD, you're disabled, big time. So the solution is to get the E's, R's, and O's back together. And that means baby steps, little ERO bridges across time. And that's how you would do a future assignment. Now, how are we going to deal with the 4th executive function deficit, the emotional, motivational one? It means all motivation is external. We already talked about this, which means I am going to have something in it for you if you are going to persist. So stop whining, stop complaining why you have to offer something for this child to work. The reason you don't offer it to other children is they have internal motivation. ADHD children do not. So don't worry that by paying them tokens for doing their reading or their assignments, you're somehow going to pervert a sense of doing things for their own reward or value. Being a good citizen for the sake of being a good citizen. That is not going to work for ADHD. The ADHD child is Donald Trump incarnate, and there better be a deal. And if there is no deal, it ain't getting done. So to borrow a phrase from Stephen Covey, please think win-win. A win for them, not just a win for you. And that means you are going to have to drop in the points, the tokens, the privileges, the sex, the drugs, the money, and the car. My medication's wearing off, I think. The last executive function, which is mental play, it's the ability to manipulate the contents of your mind in creative ways, to invent multiple possibilities. Very hard for these people. This is why they can't do mental arithmetic as well as others. It's why they can't do digit span backward as well as others. It's why they have trouble playing the little musical game Simon. Working memory. But if you can't hold things in working memory, then you can't manipulate your working memory. And that's where the source of planning and problem solving are coming from. So what do? Well, we're going to take the same word we did before, externalize. We're going to make problem solving manual, physical. You get to do it with your hands. So let's take math problems. I'm going to give you a bunch of marbles, a number line, and a abacus or a calculator. But the first three would suffice, right? You're going to do math with your hands, the way it originally was done. I'm not going to ask you to do arithmetic in your head. You're going to find that to be difficult. You need a crutch. You need an external prosthesis to help you with your math. Now, what if this is a verbal problem or task, like you've got to write a story or an essay or something? I'm going to give you a stack of 3x5 file cards, and I want you to sit down and put your mind on dump. I want you to think of any idea you can come up with that has to do with this subject. Go. I want a thought per card. I don't care what order, I don't care what sequence, just let your mind run wild. But just give me a thought a card. Now I'm going to take your cards and reorganize them, and now we've got them physical. And now we can create the story and the plot line. And if you do this on a laptop computer in Word, you can even move it around and spell check and cut and paste and do all that neat stuff because it's now external. Your ideas have become physical. And that's the secret here. Make the mental information physical in some way, and then they might be able to do it. This may explain why more people with ADHD wind up in the trades than in any other professions. I used to think it was because the trades don't require as much advanced education. I now think it's probably also the fact that it's manual. Whether you're a carpenter, a plumber, a landscaper, a bricklayer, a tuner, electrician, a tuner of pianos, I meant to say, or others, you are doing something manual. And that may matter. We'll see. Lastly, ADHD rarely occurs alone. ADHD children are at risk for all of these other disorders. In fact, 80% of ADHD children and adults will have one of these other disorders, and 50% will have at least two of these other disorders. So seeing ADHD by itself is very rare. Seeing ADHD link up with a few other disorders is not rare. It's very common. And so I would want families to understand that we may have to treat other disorders, not just the ADHD. The ADHD may be one problem, and it may be the biggest, most impairing problem, but it's not the only problem that we may have to deal with. I would want parents to understand something that the vast majority of the lay population does not understand. Self-control is not learned. It is not the result of your upbringing and how good your parents were. This is one of the most profound insights from our research on ADHD. ADHD, as we will see, is largely a neurogenetic disorder. But then let's pursue the implication. If that is true and ADHD is a self-regulation disorder, then self-control is largely neurogenetic in origin. That has a philosophically profound conclusion. The vast majority of variation in the people sitting in this room and their ability to manage their behavior is not from how they were raised. It is a part of who they are. It is a part of their neurogenetic gifts. And that is very stunning indeed. That our capacity for regulating ourselves is a neurobiological trait, not some socially learned phenomena that you just happen to pick up from your parents. So the idea that you are going to engineer personalities and IQ and academic achievement skills and all these other things just isn't true. Your child is not a blank slate on which you get to write. If you would like to read more about this, please read Steven Pinker's book, The Blank Slate, which is a review of all of this information for parents and why it isn't true. The better view is that your child is a genetic mosaic of your extended family, which means this is a unique combination of the traits that run in your family line. I like the shepherd view. You are a shepherd. You don't design the sheep. The engineering view makes you responsible for everything. Everything that goes right and everything that goes wrong. This is why parents come to us with such guilt, more guilt than we've ever seen in prior generations. Because parents today believe that it's all about them and what they do. And if they don't get it right, or if their child has a disability, they've done something wrong. When in fact the opposite is true. This has nothing to do with your particular brand of parenting. So I would rather that you stop thinking yourself as an engineer and step back and say, I am a shepherd to a unique individual. Shepherds are powerful people. They pick the pastures in which the sheep will graze and develop and grow. They determine whether they're appropriately nourished. They determine whether they're protected from harm. The environment is important, but it doesn't design the sheep. No shepherd is going to turn a sheep into a dog. Ain't going to happen, right? And yet that is what we see parents trying to do all the time, and especially parents of children with disabilities. So step back and view yourself as the shepherd to this disabled youngster, and you get to design the pasture, and that's very important, but you don't engineer the sheep. Now, that comes with it a profoundly freeing view of parenting, because what it means is, although it's important to be a shepherd, recognizing that this is a unique individual before you allows you to enjoy the show, right? So open a bottle of Chardonnay, kick off your slippers, sit back and watch what takes place, right? Because you don't get to determine this, right? So enjoy it. It doesn't last all that long anyway. They're gone before you know it, right? But if you think that what you did in your house is going to shape the life course of this individual, you are sadly mistaken, right? This is a unique individual. Let them grow, let them prosper. Please design appropriate environments around them. But you don't get to design them. As Judy Harris said in 1996, in the first book on this subject written for lay people, the book is called The Nurture Assumption. As she said, you had more to do with your child's life by where you chose to live than by anything you will ever do inside that home. Short of abuse, neglect, or malnutrition, the rest of it is just trivial variation. It's where you live. Why? Because out-of-home influences are more powerful in shaping the life course of your child than in-home influences are. And those out-of-home influences are peer groups, other adults, neighborhoods, resources, schools, and the larger community that you made available to this child. That is how you shape your child's life course. The second biggest influence is also out of your hands, and that's genetics. And you don't get to determine that. But if you think parenting is so influential, let me give you two findings that have been replicated many times. When we follow up twins, we are able to calculate how much of their behavior is due to parenting within family environment. And here's what we find. The peak years of parental influence are below 7. From 7 on to 12, it drops dramatically. After 15, it's 6%. 6% of the variation in a teenager's behavior is how their parents raised them. That's it. And after age 21, it's 0. There is no influence of parenting on any psychological trait after the age of 21. Now, do not mistake what I am saying. The knowledge your child possesses, what they know, is clearly a function of exposure in the environment. But their traits, their abilities, their makeup, their personality is not. So the idea that somehow we design these kids and we can get rid of ADHD needs to be abandoned. The other research finding is the following, and it has been found in every single study. There is no correlation between any trait of an adopted child and the people who raised them. None. If you think parenting is so powerful, prove it. Otherwise, step back, accept your role as a shepherd, do it well, and enjoy the show. It's going to be a unique set of fireworks, I guarantee you that. But now, not only do you not get the credit, you also don't have to take the blame. You didn't cause this ADHD or whatever other disability your child has.